In the summer of 1878, an entire bloodline was erased from Utah records overnight, and those who dared to ask why never spoke again. The Fairmont family name should have been one of Utah's most celebrated. Landowners, early pioneers, devout followers of the church. Yet their story never appeared in history books, not because it was forgotten, but because it was deliberately erased. Hidden behind closed doors and locked archives, the Fairmonts became a whispered legend among archivists, and a nightmare among locals who remembered too much. The first sign that something was wrong came with the disappearance of 4 Fairmont children. Gone without trace, though neighbors swore they could still hear their cries at night from behind the house's shuttered windows. The town sheriff was silenced. The church dismissed the matter, and when government officials came to inspect, they returned pale and trembling, refusing to record what they had seen. Behind every pioneer family is a story of survival, but behind the Fairmonts was something else entirely. Their blood carried a secret too dark to confront, a genetic stain that no one dared write down. The Fairmont estate sat just outside of Fairview, Utah, a sprawling farmhouse surrounded by wheat fields and the jagged Wasatch Mountains. By daylight it seemed ordinary, but by dusk the windows glowed unnaturally, as if the walls themselves were lit from within. Travelers along the road swore the air felt heavier near the property, the silence oppressive, broken only by the low hum of wind through the broken fence line. The family patriarch, Elias Fairmont, was a devout man, or so the church claimed. But behind sermons and public charity, he ruled his home with iron ritual. Children were never seen in town. Birth records were inconsistent, and neighbors quietly wondered why every child carried the same glassy, unfocused eyes, their expressions vacant, as if the world outside their own minds did not exist. Whispers spread. The Fairmont children did not age normally. Some swore they had seen the same boy at 10 years old in 1865, and again unchanged in 1878. Others believed Elias was conducting experiments in secrecy, justified under scripture but rooted in something much older than the church. When the first journalist arrived, a man named Henry Lowell, he carried with him a notebook filled with testimonies from Fairview locals. Lowell wrote of locked barns with barred windows, of children chained together as if to prevent them from wandering too far, and of strange chanting that carried across the fields late at night. His final entry was brief, shaky, and almost illegible. It read, "They do not breathe in rhythm. They do not move in rhythm. They do not belong to time as we do." Within days, Lowell vanished. His belongings were found at a boarding house in Salt Lake City, but the notebook was missing. The local paper ran only a single line. Traveling writer presumed lost in the mountains. Yet what makes this story truly disturbing is not what happened to Lowell. It is what was done to those who remembered him. Within weeks, Fairview's church elders insisted that no such journalist had ever arrived. His name was scrubbed from records. His letters home never reached his family. Even the rail line claimed to have no record of his ticket. The Fairmont secret had consumed another man. And this was only the beginning. Elias Fairmont was a man the church once described as anointed. His voice commanded respect. His prayers were delivered with trembling authority, and his public life was that of a faithful pioneer. But behind the closed doors of his farmhouse, Elias imposed rituals that blurred the line between faith and obsession. Every meal was preceded by an hour of silence. Every child was forbidden to speak unless addressed directly by him. The punishment for disobedience was not physical, at least not in the ways neighbors could see. It was psychological, ritualistic, designed to break individuality. Locals recalled seeing Elias walk the fields at night, barefoot, reciting verses not found in any Bible. His sermon spoke of purity in lineage and the chosen seed. At first, these were dismissed as eccentric interpretations of Scripture. But gradually, it became clear he was constructing a theology around his own bloodline. His family was not simply devout. They were set apart, bound by a system of belief that gave Elias absolute control. When outsiders questioned him, Elias would fix them with an unnerving stare. "God does not ask for your approval," he would say. "He asks for obedience." Few dared to push further. The Fairmont children were the heart of the unease. Pale, wide-eyed, and strangely quiet, they never seemed to laugh, run, or quarrel like others. Witnesses described them sitting for hours in perfect stillness, their heads tilted as though listening to something inaudible. Their skin had an odd translucence, veins faintly visible beneath the surface, as if they were not entirely suited for daylight. Most disturbing of all was their sameness. Though their ages supposedly ranged from infancy to adolescence, their features were eerily similar, as if they were different versions of the same face. A neighbor once whispered that she could not tell one from another, no matter how often she saw them. Some swore the children spoke in unison, finishing one another's sentences in perfect cadence. Others claimed their voices were flat, void of rhythm or emotion, as if they were rehearsing lines from a script written long before they were born. And yet, the town was instructed to treat them as blessed. No one was permitted to question their oddness. Those who did risked being summoned to the church, where they returned pale and silent, refusing to speak of what had been said behind closed doors. Those few who entered the Fairmont home carried their experiences like curses. A traveling merchant described stepping inside and being overwhelmed by a smell he could not place. Something between iron and damp earth, the odor clinging to his clothes for days. He claimed the children stood in the hallway, watching, their eyes reflecting the lamplight like animals in the dark. A midwife called to assist in childbirth fled the house in terror, insisting she had seen too much and refusing ever to return. She died less than a month later, struck suddenly by fever that no doctor could explain. Neighbors who dined at the Fairmont table reported the family's strange customs. Bread was not broken but weighed, measured, and distributed with mathematical precision. No one began eating until Elias gave a nod. And always, the children ate in silence, their movements unervingly synchronized. Visitors often fell ill soon after leaving, plagued by headaches, night terrors, or violent coughing fits. Some whispered the house itself was poisoned. Others believed the sickness was not of the body, but of the mind, an infection carried in the Fairmont gaze. It became a quiet rule in Fairview: never enter the Fairmont home unless summoned. And if summoned, never speak of what you saw. Behind the Fairmont house stood an aging barn, its doors barred with chains and locks, though no livestock were ever seen nearby. On certain nights, neighbors reported faint lamplight leaking through the cracks in its wooden frame. From inside came sounds no one could explain. Metal scraping, muffled cries, sometimes voices reciting in strange cadence. One farmhand claimed he had stumbled too close and heard children chanting in a language he did not recognize. Their tones rose and fell in unnatural rhythm, like the drone of an instrument not made by human hands. He told this story once in town, trembling, before quickly recanting it under pressure from church elders. Some said the barn held the children who had gone missing, bound together so they could not wander or be seen. Others believed it was where Elias practiced his sacrifices, not of animals but of innocence. No one dared test the locks. Those who tried found themselves visited by churchmen at night, warned to leave the Fairmont property alone. And yet, when the wind shifted across the valley, townsfolk swore they could still hear faint knocking from inside, steady, rhythmic, as though someone or something was trying to get out. Fairview's church did not simply tolerate the Fairmont family, it shielded them. Elias was not just a member. He was elevated, treated as a vessel of divine authority. Whenever rumors surfaced, the pulpit responded with fiery sermons about the danger of gossip and the sanctity of chosen families. Those who questioned too loudly were summoned to closed-door meetings with the elders. Many returned shaken, unwilling to speak of what had been said. A few left town entirely, abandoning their farms and possessions overnight, as if fleeing from something far greater than mere disapproval. Records suggest the church held financial ties with the Fairmonts. Land deeds shifted mysteriously. Funds meant for widows and orphans found their way into the Fairmont estate. But the most disturbing connection was spiritual. Elias's private doctrines seeped into sermons. Phrases like "the blood must remain pure" and "God speaks through lineage" began to echo from the pulpit, turning faith into a shield for something much darker. In time, the townspeople stopped questioning. To doubt Elias was to doubt the church, and to doubt the church was to endanger one's soul. Fear became obedience. Silence became survival. By 1877, Fairview was not only losing faith, it was losing people. Children vanished from surrounding farms. Travelers went missing on the road. A young schoolteacher, last seen walking toward the Fairmont property to deliver books, never returned. Whenever a disappearance occurred, the church provided quick explanations. Runaways, accidents, Indians. Yet the families left behind noticed a pattern. Each missing person had been seen near the Fairmont estate days before they vanished. One grieving mother swore she saw her missing daughter standing among the Fairmont children weeks later. But the girl's face was blank, her gaze empty, as though whatever made her human had been stripped away. When the mother cried out, Elias himself appeared at the gate, warning her never to return. Fear spread like disease. Parents forbade their children from wandering near the property. Men patrolled roads at night, rifles in hand. But it did not matter. People kept disappearing. And then, suddenly, the vanishings stopped. Abruptly, as if they had never happened at all. It was as though the land itself had swallowed its debt. And yet, whispers continued. Those taken had not left this world. They were inside the Fairmont walls. When the Fairmont children were finally examined by outside doctors, the reports were never meant to leave the room. In 1876, a physician from Salt Lake was summoned after one child reportedly collapsed. He described the boy's chest cavity as unsettlingly symmetrical. The heartbeat faint and arrhythmic, as though the body pulsed according to some foreign cycle. Another doctor claimed the children's pupils barely reacted to light, their eyes remaining dilated even under midday sun. Blood samples clotted too quickly, turning black within minutes. Bones appeared denser than expected, yet the children's frames were unnaturally light, almost fragile. These findings should have led to immediate alarm. Instead, the records were confiscated. The doctors who spoke out lost their licenses. At least one was found drowned in the Jordan River, his notes missing, his death labeled suicide. The church insisted nothing unusual had been found. But whispers spread among the medical community, of children who were human, but not entirely, carrying a trait that should not exist. Some began calling it the Fairmont anomaly. No journal ever published it. No archive kept the files. And those who knew learned quickly to forget. As more stories surfaced, it became clear Elias Fairmont was not simply a zealot but a priest of his own design. Neighbors described hearing strange hymns drifting from the fields long past midnight. Melodies without clear beginning or end. Voices merging in tones that made listeners' skin crawl. Witnesses claimed to see the family gather in circles, hands linked, with Elias at the center holding an iron-bound book. Some believed it was a corrupted Bible. Others swore it was older, filled with words no Christian tongue had ever spoken. The rituals always ended the same way. Silence. A crushing, unnatural silence that seemed to linger long after the chanting stopped. Animals in nearby fields would scatter violently, as though fleeing a predator. And though the church publicly denied these gatherings, elders privately attended. One farmhand swore he saw two ministers kneeling beside Elias, heads bowed, as children swayed in unison around them. The rituals were never acknowledged, never spoken of, yet everyone knew they happened. And those who listened too closely often reported waking in the night with words in their head. Phrases they did not understand, whispered in voices not their own. Perhaps the most disturbing element of the Fairmont family was their refusal to age. Neighbors recalled seeing the same child, same face, same size, same vacant stare, over a span of more than 10 years. A girl first spotted carrying water buckets in 1866 was later seen in 1877. Unchanged, still small, still blank-eyed, still silent. The same boy was seen leading cattle in both 1865 and 1878, with no sign of growth or maturity. Families who lived nearby kept quiet, but in diaries and whispered accounts, their unease spilled out. "They are copies," one farmer's wife wrote, "stamped from the same mold, trapped in a time that does not move. Children who entered the house were said to return altered, stiff, quiet, as if joining that same cycle of suspended time. When outsiders noticed and questioned Elias, his reply was chilling. Purity does not age. Corruption does. For the townspeople, that answer was final. But in private, it became the source of their greatest fear. That the Fairmont children were not truly children at all, but vessels, containers for something eternal, something passed down through blood. In late summer of 1878, fire lit up the Fairmont land. Locals awoke to the glow of flames spreading across the wheat fields, tall columns of smoke twisting into the night sky. Yet there was something strange about the fire. It burned high and bright, but by morning, no ash remained. The fields were untouched. The stalks of wheat stood tall, golden and unscorched, as though nothing had happened. Witnesses swore the flames had color. Green, violet, shades no ordinary fire could produce. Children watching from windows screamed that they saw shapes moving in the inferno. Tall figures walking through the fire, unharmed, their faces flickering in and out like mirages. Some believed the blaze was an accident, a trick of the mind. But others knew it was ritual. They swore the Fairmonts themselves were in the fields that night, standing calmly as the fire swirled around them, chanting as if the flames were summoned at their command. After that night, disappearances ceased for a time. But so did the harvest. The land around the Fairmont estate grew cold, the soil brittle, refusing to yield. It was as if the fire had consumed something deeper than crops. Something living, something buried beneath. In October of 1878, the Fairmont family disappeared. Not gradually, but all at once. Neighbors awoke to silence. No smoke from the chimney, no footsteps in the fields, no light in the barn. When a group of townsmen finally entered the property, they found the house in perfect order. Beds were made, meals half prepared on the table, chairs pushed neatly beneath the dining room. But there were no bodies. Not a single Fairmont remained. The barn was unlocked, empty, though the floor bore marks of chains dragged across the dirt. Journals, family Bibles, and letters were all missing. The walls were bare where paintings once hung. It was as if the Fairmonts had never lived there at all, their existence scrubbed from the house itself. Yet the strangest detail was the smell. Those who entered reported the same metallic odor that visitors had spoken of before. Iron and earth, heavy, suffocating, clinging to their clothes for days. For weeks, search parties scoured the mountains and valleys. No footprints, no wagons, no graves. Just silence. By winter, the Fairmont estate stood abandoned, and with it, a silence that seemed to stretch across the entire town. It should have been a scandal. A whole family vanishing overnight, leaving no trace. But instead of investigation, there was silence, enforced silence. Within weeks, federal inspectors arrived from Salt Lake, escorted by church leaders. They toured the house, the barn, the fields. Then, just as quickly, they declared the matter closed. Official records listed the Fairmonts as having relocated. No destination was provided. No trail was followed. The family simply ceased to exist on paper. Locals who pressed for answers were warned. Some were visited at night by men in black coats, their presence unspoken but unmistakable. A handful of vocal critics vanished themselves. Farmers, a schoolteacher, even the town sheriff. In church sermons, the Fairmont name was never spoken again. Children who asked questions were silenced with harsh rebukes. And the property was fenced off, deeded back to the church, its gates locked. It became clear the vanishing was not a mystery to be solved but a truth to be buried. And those who lived in Fairview learned the unspoken rule. Survival depended not on knowledge, but on forgetting. Yet the Fairmont bloodline did not die on that October night. Whispers spread of children who surfaced in orphanages across Utah in the following years. Pale, wide-eyed, eerily quiet, placed under new names, but unmistakably familiar to those who had once seen them behind the Fairmont windows. One orphanage matron in Ogden wrote of children who never cried, never played, and never aged. They sat silently in corners, watching with unblinking eyes. Staff complained of headaches, fevers, and nightmares after long hours near them. A missionary who adopted one such child recorded that the boy spoke in strange cadences during prayer, repeating lines the missionary had never taught him. Within 2 years, the man was dead. His widow refused to speak of the child, who later vanished from the census entirely. The Fairmont children had been scattered, absorbed into institutions, renamed, but never reformed. Their presence was diluted across the state like drops of poison in water. And though the town of Fairview buried its secret, Utah itself became the keeper of something darker. A generation seeded with a bloodline no one dared acknowledge. Decades later, the elderly survivors of Fairview still carried the weight of silence. In the 1920s, a few broke their vows of secrecy, confessing to children and grandchildren the nightmares that had haunted them for 50 years. One woman recalled standing outside the Fairmont barn as a girl, hearing voices that seemed to speak inside her own skull. Another admitted he had been offered money by church elders to remain quiet about seeing Fairmont children wandering in the fields long after their supposed disappearance. Their stories were fragmented, hesitant, often interrupted by sudden tears. They spoke of the shame of complicity, of knowing something was wrong but being too afraid to confront it. And always, they spoke of the eyes, the blank, glassy stares of children who never aged, who never belonged. Most refused to let their testimonies be recorded. They feared repercussions even in old age. They never left. One frail man whispered before his death, "They're still here in us." These confessions did not solve the mystery. They only deepened it, confirming what many had begun to suspect. The Fairmont bloodline was not gone. It had been scattered, hidden in plain sight. By the mid-20th century, science began to uncover what history had buried. In 1946, a team of geneticists at the University of Utah quietly obtained files once sealed by the church. Inside were fragments of physician notes, scraps of confiscated journals, and a few preserved samples marked only with the initials EF. The findings disturbed even hardened researchers. The samples showed anomalies no textbook could explain: abnormal hemoglobin binding, unnaturally high bone density paired with low body mass, and peculiar resistance to common pathogens. In plain words, the Fairmont strain of blood did not behave like ordinary human blood. One scientist described it as a branch that should not exist on the tree. Another refused to continue the study, claiming the data implied deliberate manipulation, something engineered, not born. Within months, the files were resealed, the samples destroyed, and the project abandoned under unexplained orders. Yet rumors persisted that some scientists had smuggled copies of the results, keeping them hidden in private archives. And in whispered circles, a question began to take shape. What if the Fairmonts had never vanished, but adapted, weaving their blood quietly into American life? By the 1950s, scattered testimonies surfaced of families across Utah with children who mirrored the old Fairmont traits: pale skin, glassy eyes, unsettling stillness. Some were dismissed as superstition, but others were harder to ignore. One family in Provo claimed their daughter had not grown in height for nearly 7 years, though her mind advanced rapidly. In Salt Lake, a boy was reported speaking fluent Latin without ever having studied it. In Ogden, a child was observed standing motionless for hours, heart rate barely detectable, before suddenly resuming normal activity. Each case was quietly documented, then suppressed. Families were pressured into silence, children relocated, names changed. Yet the truth lingered like a shadow. The Fairmont bloodline had not been erased. It had been scattered, diluted, hidden. The implication was chilling. If the Fairmont children had been placed in orphanages, adopted and absorbed into ordinary homes, then their descendants lived among ordinary Americans, unseen, unnoticed, carrying a strain of something not fully human. The story of the Fairmonts was never written in official history. It was scrubbed, denied, buried beneath sermons and sealed archives. Yet fragments remain: diary entries, suppressed medical files, whispered testimonies from the dying. Together they paint a picture not of a vanished family, but of a bloodline deliberately hidden. The silence surrounding the Fairmonts is not accidental. It is institutional. It is generational. And it suggests one truth: The family was never meant to disappear. They were meant to disperse. Look closely enough at the past, and the pattern becomes clear. Look closely enough at the present, and the pattern becomes terrifying. Because the Fairmonts are not gone. They are still here. In towns, in cities, in schools and churches. They live under new names, their blood quietly shaping generations. And perhaps when you pass someone on the street with eyes just a little too glassy, or a child who never seems to age, you are not imagining it. You are seeing history's most disturbing genetic secret. Still alive, still spreading, still waiting.